U.S. President Donald Trump seems intent on driving a wedge into the Canada-U.S. relationship, at least one, that is. One that he says the relationship has been historically unbalanced.
President Trump believes in reciprocity, and it is about dang time that we have a president who actually looks out for the interests of American businesses and workers. And all he's asking for at the end of the day are fair and balanced trade practices, and unfortunately, Canada has not been treating us very fairly at all over the past several decades.
Okay, joining us now to weigh in on Trump's possible mindset and his motivation is David Frum. David Frum is a political commentator and author and former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. David Frum, it's good to see you again. Thank you for being here, sir.
Fine. Thank you.
Depending on the day, the motivation for the president, it's territorial expansion, it's economic repatriation, it's settling trade imbalances. What do you think Donald Trump's real end goal is in all of this?
Well, I think there's a real danger in trying to look too carefully at what motivates him. There's this, unfortunately, a large and not very helpful industry of Trump-splaining, of people trying to make sense out of what the president is doing when there is no sense. I've got a column coming out tomorrow in The Atlantic, and I say, you know, the way an opioid painkiller works is it binds itself to the brain's nervous system and it blocks information from the body to the pain receptors of the body. And if you need it, that's very helpful. Well, these Trump-splainers, what they're doing is they're also blocking information from to the pain receptors, but we need that information. And the idea that the president is dangerously unbalanced, that in fact, he does not have a strategic goal. And all he's doing is inflicting tremendous harm on the world economy, on American savers, on American companies for no reason other than malice. It's an upsetting truth, but it is the truth.
I'm going to dangerously venture into the world of Trump-splaining here, and I apologize in advance. Is it just attention? I mean, the guy's probably done more media than any person in the history of the world, going back to his, New York days in the 80s and everything, to now in The Apprentice and everything. Is it just to be the main character in the story every day?
No, I think there's some petty personal grievances. You'll remember Justin Trudeau was photographed with a group of world leaders, I think in 2018, 2019, all of them laughing at Donald Trump. Most of the leaders in the photo were laughing. Justin Trudeau was saying the thing that made them laugh. Trump lives by image. He would have seen that photograph and it would lodge in his brain as an unsalvable wound. So I think that there's that is there. And I think he also has a sense of, look, the whole tariff plan is coming unstuck a little bit, especially with regard to Mexico. So he doesn't want to give in without smashing something on the way out the door. And Canada beckons as a target that's more smashable because basically there are a lot of things that the Mexican government would consider doing that a Canadian government won't consider doing.
Yeah, I think that was the G7 in Cornwall in England, if I remember correctly, where they were all sort of filmed. It was caught on a Buckingham Palace feed that was supposed to have no audio, and it had audio, and here we are years later, where it's still a thing, right?
Right, and he wouldn't have forgotten. He doesn't forget those kinds of slights.
So whatever the true motivations are, the consequences of it are severe. I mean, we look at the stock market, it's trillions of dollars in wealth lost, the constant threat of tariffs. People are losing jobs, investments being halted. There's talks of recession on both sides of the border here. We talk to Democrats with some frequency, and they all say what it's going to take is Republicans to sort of push back and say no. I mean, do you think that's even possible at this point?
There's an old joke from Soviet times, and I think it applies to what's been going on here. You can say, on average, my portfolio is doing pretty well, worse than last year, but better than next year. So the cost of upending the global trade regime is very, very, very expensive. Donald Trump has this image that the way we trade is people make primitive industrial items like, say, a toaster. J.D. Vance used his vice president candidate, J.D. Vance, used the toaster as his image when he was talking about trade on the campaign trail. The idea of advanced industrial products with thousands of components and subcomponents, and each of those components crossing a NAFTA border 5 or 6 times over the course of its career from beginning to end, with a tariff at every transfer. That's not the way Donald Trump understands the world economy. He's a man of the 1970s. He thinks in terms of toasters. He thinks in terms of cars. He doesn't understand how the modern economy works, how modern supply chains work, and how destructive all of this is. But the stock market gets it, and the stock market is reacting with panic.
Well, surely governors, senators, and Congress people understand it as well, right? And I wonder, like, there is, you hear from Canadian officials who go to Washington to try to head off this trade war, that Republicans they speak with will say one thing in private, but then either they don't understand what the president is going to do, so they have no insight into it, or they're afraid to defy him in public. I mean, had they just adopted this policy, or are they being, these policies, or are they being pushed into it mostly through fear, do you think?
Well, look, if Donald Trump had somehow been prevented from becoming the Republican nominee in 2024, I don't think it's very likely that any party, let alone the Republican Party, would have campaigned on a program of let's start a trade war against the world, against the three biggest trading partners, also against the European Union, and against everybody. So that's not anybody's idea of good policy or sensible. But Donald Trump has put enough people on the record that it's very hard for them to walk away. I mean, what is the Secretary of Commerce supposed to say now? Everything I said on television all those times was stupid and ignorant, and I never meant it. It was just a lie. You do get trapped by your words. And one of the dangers in Trump's Washington is some of the people in the Trump White House I know, and I know what they think. They think, well, what I say in private is what matters, not what I say in public. But in politics, that's not true. You can believe anything in private, but it's what you say in public that has consequences. And if you're not willing to say something in public, then it doesn't exist.
So when Trump says in public, like he did today, that all of this could go away if Canada would just become, the great 51st state of the United States, and, talking about, as he did a while back, about using economic coercion to force the annexation. I mean, do you think that's a real goal, David?
How many Canadian senators would Donald Trump like voting at his next impeachment trial? Because, is it 2 votes to convict? Is it 4 votes to, 2 votes to convict, 4 votes, 20 votes to convict? Every Canadian senator, what he has in mind is this is one of those moments where he reveals his animus and malice, but he doesn't actually have a plan. He's not really intending to annex Greenland either. He's just trying to be intimidating, because again, there would be those same problems. I mean, is Donald Trump real? Right now, the residents of Greenland benefit from not only universal health care, but it includes dental and vision. Is the United States territory of Greenland going to provide the 80,000 people with free health care plus dental plus vision? And what happens when Americans find out that this deal exists in Greenland but not in the mainland United States? So these are not real plans, but they are real expressions of intention, and the intention is dangerous.
Well, we're about to go into an election up here. And as you well know, the transition from Justin Trudeau will be completed in a day, 2 days, 3 days. By the end of the week, Mark Carney is going to be the Prime Minister. Then we'll have an election, and either Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre will be the Prime Minister. What's your sense of what that does to the relationship with the United States?
Well, I would say this is an example of how unhelpful to everybody this is. What you would have said 6 months ago is the biggest issue in the Canadian election would be, take your pick, Canada's slow growth of productivity, which has constrained economic growth and depressed incomes, or maybe it's the cost of housing in the places where the jobs are, or maybe it's the environmental questions. I don't think Canadians are going to have a chance now to talk about any of those things that people would regard as the actual real priorities facing the country when they're faced with this maybe trolling, but still, you have to take it seriously, threat to the sovereignty of the state. And so this completely unhelpful discussion that is going nowhere is going to elbow out productivity growth, cost of housing, environmental questions, everything that you'd want to put on the table for the future of a country of 40 million people.
Just as a final point, I mean, where do you see sort of the bigger global relationship with the United States going? Like, I know Trump may not he will not last forever as president, but we don't know if Trumpism survives his presidency. You see Canada looking at other economic options and elbows out sort of as a country right now. We saw what happened with President Zelensky in the Oval Office and the way Europe is changing its approach. I mean, do you think the world will just not trust the United States after Trump?
Yeah. Look, when Trump left office the first time, I suggested that whoever replace him should go around the world with a vow: the United States of America will never, ever, ever mix tequila and Quaaludes ever again. But you only get to make that vow once, because Donald Trump has been president twice. And the second time, he's been doing things like turning off the flow of targeting information to the Ukrainian democracy as it defends itself. Everybody has to take that seriously. I think you're going to see it's going to have a long-term effect in the way countries purchase arms. It's going to have a long-term effect on Europe. I mean, it may be a positive one on European defense integration. And this is going to leave the Canadians who live through this are going to have different attitudes toward the United States in the future, and not in a way that is more neighborly, but in a way that's less neighborly.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a mental breakup, I think, for a lot of Canadians, David Frum. You know, that they're kind of done with this after what they've seen for the first 6 weeks of this presidency.
And there will be another president someday, and things will be better, and the president probably will vow never to mix tequila and Quaaludes ever again. But it's happened twice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it has. It has. David Frum, we're out of time. I appreciate the conversation. I want to thank you for being here. That's David Frum. Thank you, sir.